Picture this: a man at the pinnacle of success, adored by many, sharing his life with the woman he believed was his soulmate. But behind the perfect facade lies a sinister plan. She's not who she says she is, and her love, nothing but a calculated act. What happens when the person you cherish most sees your life as nothing more than a stepping stone to their own greed? This is the chilling tale of Vanessa Blake, the millionaire's wife who turned her husband's trust into a death sentence, all for the sake of his fortune. Jonathan Blake was a man who seemed to have it all. Born into modest beginnings, he clawed his way up the corporate ladder, eventually founding his own tech company in Silicon Valley. Over 3 decades, his relentless drive and sharp business instincts turned his company into a powerhouse, earning him millions and the respect of his peers. To those around him, Jonathan was a symbol of what hard work and determination could achieve. But beneath his professional success, Jonathan harbored a deep yearning for something money couldn't buy: a loving partner to share his life with. And that's when Vanessa entered his world. Vanessa Blake, or Vanessa Miller as she was known before their marriage, was the epitome of glamour. With her striking looks, impeccable style, and a knack for commanding attention, Vanessa could light up any room she walked into. But behind her polished exterior was a woman with secrets. Vanessa had reinvented herself more times than she could count, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and unresolved relationships. To Jonathan, however, she was perfect. They met at a charity gala in Los Angeles, a glitzy affair filled with the city's elite. Vanessa was enchanting, and Jonathan, who had spent years focused on his work, was instantly captivated. The two quickly became inseparable, their whirlwind romance culminating in a lavish wedding within a year of their first meeting. For a time, it seemed like the fairy tale Jonathan had always dreamed of. Vanessa played the role of a devoted wife flawlessly, supporting him at public events and hosting extravagant parties at their sprawling estate in California. The estate itself was a marvel, a sprawling mansion set on acres of manicured gardens, complete with a private lake and a guest house. It was the picture of wealth and stability, a testament to Jonathan's success. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. Mark Rivers, a smooth-talking drifter with a checkered past, Mark had spent years bouncing between odd jobs and run-ins with the law. He met Vanessa at a luxury spa, a chance encounter that quickly spiraled into something far more sinister. Mark was everything Vanessa craved: dangerous, unscrupulous, and willing to do whatever it took to get ahead. The two began an affair, meeting in secret while Jonathan remained blissfully unaware. What started as a forbidden romance soon evolved into a shared ambition: to claim Jonathan's fortune, no matter the cost. Vanessa and Mark's plan was as audacious as it was cruel. Together they began plotting to remove Jonathan from the picture entirely. But for now, they played their roles to perfection. Vanessa continued to live the life of a doting wife, while Mark stayed in the shadows, biding his time. The stage was set for a betrayal that would shock everyone who thought they knew the Blakes. To the outside world, the Blakes seemed untouchable. Their life together was a seamless picture of success. But within the walls of their mansion, tensions were beginning to surface. Jonathan started to notice the little things: Vanessa's unexplained absences, the sudden influx of expensive purchases, and the mysterious phone calls that always ended abruptly when he walked into the room. At first, he brushed it off, attributing her behavior to the stress of running their social calendar. But as the months passed, the excuses began to wear thin. One evening, Jonathan stumbled upon an email that wasn't meant for him, a confirmation for a hotel reservation under a name he didn't recognize. When he asked Vanessa about it, her response was casual, almost rehearsed. But the seed of doubt had been planted. He started noticing more: a bracelet he hadn't bought her, a photo she quickly hid on her phone, and a growing distance between them that he couldn't explain. Jonathan's unease grew into sleepless nights. He began working late, not because he had to, but because being at home felt like stepping into an unfamiliar world. He confided in a close friend, who suggested he hire a private investigator. It was a step he never thought he would take, but his instincts told him something wasn't right. When the investigator returned with photos of Vanessa meeting a man at a secluded restaurant, Jonathan's worst fears were confirmed. But it wasn't just the affair that shocked him. The man, Mark Rivers, had a reputation. a history of deceit and violence. Jonathan realized that this wasn't just about betrayal. It was something far more dangerous. Jonathan began to piece together the truth. Vanessa's charm, which had once captivated him, now felt calculated. Her backstory, which he had never questioned, suddenly seemed riddled with holes. The private investigator uncovered more than just an affair. Vanessa's financial records revealed unexplained transfers to an account linked to Mark. Jonathan noticed discrepancies in his own accounts, unauthorized withdrawals that Vanessa couldn't explain. When he confronted her, she dismissed his accusations with practiced ease, turning the conversation back on him, questioning his trust and loyalty. It was a tactic that left Jonathan questioning himself, but the evidence was mounting. The more Jonathan uncovered, the more isolated he felt. He realized that Vanessa's affection had always been conditional, tied to his wealth and status. She had charmed her way into his life with a fabricated past, a web of lies designed to ensnare him. Mark's role in her life became clearer. They shared more than just a romantic connection, they shared a purpose. Every piece of evidence pointed to a coordinated effort to strip Jonathan of everything he had worked for. Jonathan's realization came too late. As he delved deeper, he understood the lengths Vanessa and Mark were willing to go to achieve their goal. But by then, the trap had already been set. His trust had been his greatest vulnerability, and now it would cost him everything. Mark Rivers quietly moved into a motel a few miles from the Blake estate under a false identity. It was a strategic move, keeping him close to Vanessa while ensuring his presence remained hidden from prying eyes. From there, Vanessa and Mark began to finalize their plans. Vanessa had already gained access to Jonathan's financial accounts and had started making small withdrawals, careful not to arouse suspicion. But the couple's ambition demanded more than financial theft. It required Jonathan's complete removal. The first attempt came in the form of a poisoned drink. Vanessa slipped a carefully measured dose into Jonathan's evening whiskey, confident that her plan would go unnoticed. But Jonathan fell ill instead of succumbing to the poison, and the close call left him shaken. He grew increasingly paranoid, sensing that something was wrong but unable to put his finger on it. He began avoiding meals prepared by Vanessa and started keeping a close watch on his surroundings. The tension between them grew, with Vanessa's mask of affection slipping under the pressure. The emotional toll on Jonathan was devastating. The man who had once thrived in high-stakes boardrooms now found himself consumed by fear in his own home. Every shadow, every unexplained sound felt like a threat. He confided in his closest allies, but even they couldn't fathom the full extent of his wife's betrayal. Jonathan knew he was running out of time. The walls were closing in, and he needed to act before Vanessa and Mark could strike again. But he couldn't escape the sinking feeling that it might already be too late. One fateful night, Jonathan summoned the courage to confront Vanessa. He had spent hours preparing, gathering every piece of evidence he had. Emails, financial records, photographs, everything that exposed her betrayal. Vanessa listened in silence as Jonathan laid out the full extent of her deceit. For a moment, there was no response. Then, with a calmness that chilled him to the core, she simply smiled. That smile was the last thing Jonathan remembered before the lights went out. Vanessa had planned every detail. That night, Mark Rivers arrived at the Blake estate under the cover of darkness, dressed in black and armed with a crowbar to force entry. The back door, left intentionally unlocked by Vanessa, allowed him easy access. He moved through the grand hallways of the mansion, careful not to disturb anything that could betray his presence prematurely. The house was eerily silent, save for the occasional creak of the hardwood floor under his boots. He took his position in the shadows of the living room, a space he knew Jonathan would pass through on his nightly routine. Jonathan had been in his study, reviewing financial documents that only deepened his suspicion of Vanessa. When he finally left the room, he was greeted by Mark, a figure emerging from the darkness. The confrontation was immediate and chaotic. Mark lunged at Jonathan, who managed to grab a nearby lamp to defend himself. The struggle was fierce, with furniture toppling over as the two men fought. Jonathan landed several blows, but Mark was prepared. A concealed knife glinted in the dim light before it struck. Jonathan collapsed to the floor, clutching his side, his strength fading rapidly. Mark wasted no time. He began ransacking the room, pulling drawers out of cabinets and scattering papers across the floor to simulate a robbery. Jewelry boxes were emptied, and cash was taken from a small safe that Vanessa had told him about in advance. Upstairs, Vanessa waited, her phone in hand, ready to call the police at just the right moment to complete their story. The entire scene was designed to shift suspicion away from her and onto an unknown assailant. By the time Mark left through the same back door he had entered, Jonathan was already gone, his life stolen in an act of greed that had been months in the making. The police arrived to find Vanessa sobbing inconsolably, her performance as the grieving widow carefully rehearsed. She claimed to have been upstairs when the attack happened, awoken by the sound of breaking glass. But the details of her story didn't add up. The investigators noticed small inconsistencies, a misplaced object, a timeline that didn't quite align. Her responses, though measured, lacked the natural reactions expected from someone grieving such a sudden loss. As the investigation continued, the facade Vanessa had so carefully maintained began to crumble. At first, she held her ground with practiced precision, giving rehearsed statements to the police and projecting the image of a grieving widow. Her calm exterior, however, began to waver under scrutiny. Investigators combed through the crime scene and uncovered a series of discrepancies. Items that should have been disturbed in a robbery were left untouched. The safe, for instance, showed no signs of forced entry, a detail Vanessa couldn't explain convincingly. The breakthrough came with forensic evidence. Mark's fingerprints were discovered on the knife used in the attack, a glaring oversight in their carefully crafted plan. Vanessa dismissed this as a coincidence, claiming not to know who Mark Rivers was, but investigators were already piecing together a much darker narrative. Emails retrieved from Vanessa's laptop showed a chilling level of coordination with Mark. The tone of the messages revealed not just a romantic affair, but a calculated plan to siphon Jonathan's wealth and eliminate him entirely. Bank records exposed multiple wire transfers Vanessa had made to Mark, amounts that aligned with the timeline leading up to the murder. Under pressure, Mark was the first to break. Arrested shortly after the discovery of his fingerprints, he initially denied involvement. But faced with the overwhelming evidence against him, he agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. His confession was a devastating blow to Vanessa. Mark detailed every step of their plot, from the poisoned drink that failed to the final staged robbery. He painted Vanessa as the architect, describing her cold and manipulative nature with chilling clarity. With his testimony, the case against her became airtight. Vanessa's resolve crumbled in the courtroom. As the prosecution laid out the evidence, witnesses recounted her erratic behavior in the days following the murder. Her financial records, the staged alibi, and the damning testimony from Mark left no room for doubt. Her initial composure gave way to moments of visible frustration as the walls closed in around her. Still, she refused to admit guilt, maintaining her innocence to the very end. The jury, however, saw through her performance. After a brief deliberation, Vanessa Blake was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Vanessa's trial was a spectacle, drawing national attention. Her demeanor in court shocked those who had once admired her. Cold, unrepentant, she seemed unfazed as the prosecution laid out the gruesome details of her betrayal. But in the end, justice was served. Vanessa Blake was sentenced to life in prison, her once glamorous life reduced to a cautionary tale. Jonathan's legacy, however, lived on, a reminder of the devastating consequences of misplaced trust. How far would you go for wealth and power? And how often do we truly know the people closest to us? Vanessa Blake's story is a chilling reminder of the shadows that can linger beneath even the brightest lights. Her tale forces us to confront the unsettling truth that sometimes the people we let closest to us are the ones capable of the greatest betrayal. It compels us to question not just the motives of others, but the depth of our own vulnerabilities. If you were captivated by this tale of betrayal and greed, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know your thoughts on Vanessa's story. Was she driven by desperation or pure evil? For more stories uncovering the darkest truths, stay tuned. Until next time, keep your eyes open. You never know what's hiding in plain sight.